Okay. Yeah. So it's Grace rewrote my story for a true story of domestic violence from a child's perspective.
So I want to go into this, and I'm going to read some passages from it, and have you just kind of explain a little bit about what was going on at that time. If you want to give a general synopsis at first, what the book is about, we can start there, and then we can start asking you some questions about it.
Okay. Yeah. So it's Grace rewrote my story for a true story of domestic violence from a child's perspective. I was watching a show, a Netflix show actually called Made. And it was like God spoke to me through that show in a very weird way. I had never really dealt with any childhood trauma. I watched my mom be abused for 14 years of my life, and even a few years after, at least verbally. And I never dealt with it. I shoved it aside. So when I'm watching that show, it's about a young mom and a little girl who are trying to escape an abusive husband or man, just a relationship, I guess. And the mom and the girl just look like me and my mom. And as I'm watching it, it's all from the mom's perspective. And I just was watching that little girl, and I'm like, oh, I was her. Mm-hmm. I was that little girl, yet she's so silent. She shuts herself in a cabinet so she doesn't hear or see anything. Mm-hmm. And her story needs to be told. Not only that, like, my story needs to be told because my story didn't end there. And I've taken it and shoved it aside, but it's an important part of my story because it's a big part of how God has redeemed me and how he can change a life that seemed to be doomed from the beginning.
Now, before you wrote this, you said you got the idea from there. And this is, I'm going to touch on this a little bit later. At the end of this book, like before you wrote it, were you already there? Were you already?
No, this book got me there.
Okay.
I had to write this. I didn't realize I had to write it until I'm going through it, and I'm reliving every emotion as I'm writing out my story. God is reminding me of things that happened, and I just feel like he prompted me to work through this in order to get to a place of true forgiveness and healing. I had not healed from my past, and I was allowing it to just destroy my life.
So one of the first questions that, and we talked about this beforehand, your name is Crystal Thompson, mm-hmm. But you have on the book Crystal Morgan, and I love the way you explained why you did that. Can you explain that again?
Yeah, so Crystal Morgan is my maiden name. I've been married 3 times, and I do talk about that in the book and how my life has progressed, but I've always mistakenly tried to find my identity in my relationships. And when I wrote this, I did not want any one of those pieces of what I thought my identity was to come across in my book. So I put Crystal Morgan because that is somebody that I will always be. And it's also who I was when I wrote this book. My story was when I was Crystal Morgan. Obviously, I've changed and grown a lot from then, but I was Crystal Morgan throughout this entire story. And then you see at the end where I've changed, and now my identity is in Christ. It's no longer in any relationship. It's not even in my maiden name, but I will always have this name attached to me.
Yeah, I love that. I love that explanation. So get into some of the questions. Can you explain the title a little bit of why you picked Grace Rewrote My Story?
Yeah, so when I got the idea to write the book, I started just coming up with ideas and just writing whatever came to mind. I hadn't had a title yet. And I was worshiping one morning in church, and the song My Testimony was being sung. And those words, it was like God just highlighted them on the screen and in my heart. And immediately I was like, that's my title. It has to be. Because that's exactly what happened. Mm-hmm. Grace has rewritten my story.